Hi, welcome to the Influence Women podcast. I'm your host and global director, Kathleen Cooke. Well, today we are welcoming Tamara Battaglia with us today. She's an author of an incredible new devotional called Written in Heaven. It's stories from leading women in the Christian community and how God has impacted their lives. I was honored to be a part of this project, and we had a great conversation about how it all came to be. So stay tuned. Hi, welcome to the Influence Women podcast. I'm your host, Kathleen Cooke, and I'm thrilled today to have Tamara Battaglia with us today, who's written an incredible devotional book that I've been honored and privileged to be a part of. And we're going to talk about why stories matter and resonate. So first, let me tell you just a little bit about Tamara. Tamara Battaglia has been nearly 2 decades an experienced flight attendant in the air working with the general public. So she knows a lot about communicating to the general public. But she hails from Pasadena, Texas, and resides in a little town now here in Tennessee called Franklin, along with her husband, Joe. You know, what I love about your story and Joe's story is that you allowed God to be first in your life in making it happen. And you've created a new story. Tell us how you came to have this idea of this new devotional of women that you wanted to gather together. And tell us that story, how this new wonderful devotional, I've got one here, Written in Heaven, his story, our lives came together. Tell us about that.
Well, Joe and I, when we got married, we consolidated all of our belongings and our books. We both had many books. And I had put together a bookshelf with all female authors on this bookshelf. Some were people that I had followed through the years and read many of their books. Priscilla Shirer, for one, Sheila Walsh. And so there were books that were from my collection, and then there were books from his collection. It's fascinating to me, but my husband is in the media, and he knows many women in media, in Christian media, and we have many books from them. And I was looking at these books, and many of the ladies he knew, I have never heard of. And they had written books, many of them about their lives. Some are wonderful authors. Cynthia Tobias talks about how to raise kids, and she has, I think, 6 books. And she is a phenomenal writer on helping you raise your children, and great information. Anyway, she was one I'd never heard of, and I started looking at her books, and I was just floored by how wonderful they were. There was Jeannie Ortega, and her story. If you're familiar with her story, she wrote about her life story, and it was not an easy story. She really had a difficult life as a child, but you can see how God orchestrated her life, and now she's a pastor's wife. Mm-hmm. But just looking at all these different books, I thought, I didn't know anything about any of these women, and wouldn't it be great if we could put them all in one book so that people could be introduced to their stories, because they were just remarkable stories, and their stories go beyond the book. That the stories that we put into the devotional, each one of them have done remarkable things for the kingdom. And so I wanted people to know about that. I wanted people to know about my friends, but I also wanted God to know about their stories, because we all have a God story. And I don't think we share enough in our life about what God is doing at this moment, but then also what he's done in the past. And if I've had a long journey with the Lord. I asked the Lord into my life and into my heart when I was 12, and now I'm in my 60s. And so I've got to see God's providence in my life and how he has moved in my life and how I can trust him with every situation in my life, every relationship in my life. I can trust he has a plan, and that we can honor and glorify him with every in our lives. Everything that we can do, we can glorify him.
Absolutely. And certainly the journey you've had with Joe and with creating this devotional is impacting so many lives and so many continual stories as we are able to talk about the things that God has dealt with and allowed us to walk through with him on. And so it was a wonderful project. I was honored to be a part of that project. And I know that there are many, many stories in the book that resonate with you. Can you tell us one that particularly resonated with you that stood out?
Yours, for one, was very to me. It is just a remarkable story, and anyway, I love your story.
Oh, thanks.
I'll let you tell your story.
Okay. Well, we can tell it together then. It's called Enough Love. It's the second to the last entry in the book. And it was a very personal experience with me. And but I'll let you maybe share on how it impacted your life for a moment first.
Well, your story is about when you were a child. Mm-hmm. And I think as a child, I lost someone very close to me at 9. And it was my aunt. And so it was a very sudden loss. And it impacted our lives very deeply. But I think I resonated with your story more because of that. But then I just could envision you as a child and the loss of your brother, and then being at Christmas time, and your mom just had such faith, and she was preparing you, but then yet God surprised you and your family with a wonderful surprise of Christmas, and your friends and family loved you and needed them to do what they did for your family. And then I probably all of them have impacted me. I'm just the curator of these stories. But each one, I know that each one will resonate with people because we all go through hard times. We all go through times we don't understand. The fascinating thing about this book, once we put it together, was that, and Joe helped me put this book together. I could not have done this book without him, is knowing that we have most of life's journey in this book. We have Lisa Robertson talking about her going through cancer and how that all evolved and how she, God ordained all of her doctors and orchestrated all of that. Jennifer O'Neill, I will say, her story was riveting. I was blown away because I had known her as a cover girl and seen her in movies. And, when you look at somebody and you think, oh, they're this beautiful woman and they have all this going for them, but yet you don't know the backstory. And she really had led a really difficult life. And then to see how God redeemed her. And now she has a foundation, and she has a farm, and she ministers to veterans that have PTSD. And it's a beautiful organization that she has with dealing. She has them come to her farm, and it just is such a healing process. There are just so many different of life circumstances is in the book, and I did not. What my prayer was is that each woman would write the story that God had placed on their heart to write. And he knew every story, and it was profound to me. The stories that the women shared, they were very personal, very honest. And also you got to see each one was written by them and their prayer. There was a prayer, a Bible verse, and then a little bio on each one. So you get to know each woman, but the remarkable thing, each woman chose their scripture that went with it, their story, their mission statement, and their prayer, and then a bio on each one. So you get to know them personally and what they're doing for the Lord. And each one is just doing phenomenal things for the Lord and the kingdom.
Yes, yes. Well, and I'll backtrack just a little bit to kind of explain my story a little bit. So I had a brother who passed away. He was born without a valve in his heart and had open heart surgery as a baby. They didn't know, my parents didn't know at any moment whether he would live or die, whether this experimental set surgery of inserting a pig's valve into his heart as a replacement would last. And he lived to be 6.5. I was an oopsie in between that. I was about a year younger than he was, and when I was born, and so we were almost like twin kids almost at the same time, and very close. And but at the age of 6.5, it did fall apart. They tried to replace it, and he died on the operating table. It was right before Christmas. And the funeral was held right before Christmas. My father had been a school teacher and had time off during the holiday time, which is when they had scheduled this second surgery to try to replace the valve in my brother's heart. And he died right before Christmas. And so my mom, wanting to just kind of get back and get things settled before my father had to go back to work and things had to, go back into having life, said we were going to head home. We'd had the funeral where my grandparents lived and where my parents had been living all of their lives in Reno, Nevada. And my father was a school teacher and basketball coach in Las Vegas, Nevada. And so we traveled back on Christmas Eve night. And my mom kept telling me in the car, that Santa wasn't going to visit us this year because of everything that was happening and not to expect much. And we would have probably peanut butter sandwiches for lunch, for dinner that night, because there was nothing in the refrigerator, of course. And my father had been a very successful basketball coach in Las Vegas at the time. And in fact, when I buried him and he went on to see Jesus a few years ago, he was still considered one of the most winning basketball high school coaches of all time. And so bottom line is, and to get to the end of the story, my mom kept assuring us that Santa and no gifts would be there and no food would be there. And when we opened the door to our house and we arrived back at our house, the house was full of Christmas smells. We had the turkey smell from the oven and the Christmas tree smell because people had come in and put up a Christmas tree and gifts under the tree for us. And there was a pile of notes from people in the community who were expressing their condolences to my parents and our family. And it was just overwhelming. And when I talk about it now, I always start to get to tear up myself, because it just shows you how we have to have that childlike faith in our hearts and our lives, even today, to be able to trust God and to be able to know that He's still got our backs. He still loves us and cares for us. And it's written that Jesus is our friend, our most trusted friend. And so it's just a wonderful memory and story I always kept very close to my heart. And I was so privileged and honored to be able to share that story with you in that book and with those who will be purchasing the book and reading that book. How can we get a hold of that book, by the way? Is it on Amazon? Where can we get that book?
It is online on many major retailers. It's Amazon.com, ChristianBook.com, Walmart.com, BarnesandNoble.com. You can probably Google it and it would come up all the places, but those are the 4 places that my understanding is that it's in.
Yes. So again, here's a picture of what the book looks like, and we encourage you to read it. And thank you. I'm so honored again, Tammy, that you allowed me to be a part of that group of very influential women and very leading women who allowed our story to be told. So our final question might be to you today is, if you have a story, Tammy, how would you encourage someone to get it out and let it be heard and seen and felt by others? So often we feel sometimes that our story doesn't matter, that we don't have a good story. Maybe we haven't had an incredible something that's happened to our lives until we really start thinking about it. And then we can come up with really stories that God has walked us through in our lives. So how would you encourage someone to get their story out?
Well, I never planned on writing a book. And so, God will whisper to your heart, and all of us have a God story. All of us do. And you just never know how your story will impact others. And God didn't give us our stories to not share. I always think of the Bible, and I think about the disciples and how they shared their stories. And if they had not shared their stories, we may not have known, the wonderful things about Jesus and how God, orchestrated their lives and the things that they went through, and God saw them through. But I just encourage anybody to start sharing your stories with anybody, friends, family. And then God will take you through. And if it's meant for you to share it, to write a story or write a book, then God will make a way for that to happen.
Yes, you can just share it with people that, to me, it's, I always tell people to write it down and get it down, because you never know the opportunity where God will allow you to tell it somewhere. Maybe you're stuck on an airplane with someone and you're sitting next to them, or on a bus or a train, or, at the beauty salon, or, wherever. You have a story that's important. I love how you said in your story, when you were talking about connecting and growing your relationship with Joe, that you wrote your story to him. You wrote what had been happening with him in your life already, and he was able to write one back. And so I think God allows us to have those stories for a reason and a purpose, and he's going to use those stories if we will allow ourselves to get out of our shells and open up our hearts a little bit and write it down. I think of filmmakers today, and I know that often great films have come from someone having written the story about themselves, or someone writing a story about an incredible event or an occurrence that they came across in someone's life. And I think that's the beauty, again, about the devotional you've written, again, Written in Heaven, is that it's from a variety of women, and they've all had their own personal stories and personal journeys to walk through. And it's so fun to have that variety, to see it. It's going to resonate, like you said, whether you're having health issues, financial issues, relationship issues, whatever happens in your life, stories are so important, and they impact our lives. I look forward to seeing this book just rise up in popularity. It's a great book. It's great to have for gifts, and for anyone that that loves reading stories and connecting with women's stories specifically. So, again, thanks for having you on our Influence Women podcast today, Tammy.
Thanks, Kathleen. I so enjoyed it.
Well, thanks for joining us again for another Influence Women podcast. I'm your host and global director, Kathleen Cooke. It's been great having you with us. Please leave a comment, like us, and also click the bell so that each time an Influence Women podcast drops, you'll be notified. We love hearing from you, so please do leave us a comment. And if you're not a member of Influence Women, we want you to be a member. So join us at influencewomen.org. We have great events, podcasts, and webinars throughout the year, and you need to be a part of a community of women who are wanting to connect and collaborate to change our culture with what we see on our screens. So join us each time at influencewomen.org and join us for the next Influence Women podcast. See you next time.